So, welcome to Startup Central, Work Avenue's annual flagship business event. It is absolutely fantastic to see you all today, and I really hope that you enjoy the event that we have organised for you. I am delighted, as is my wonderful business team colleague Kim Davidson, who's going to wave now, to see so many familiar names and faces on the screen. But for those of you who are new to Work Avenue, here is a potted history. Work Avenue was established back in 2006 and predominantly focused on helping people to upskill through vocational training programs. This was a time when it was a candidate's market and it wasn't really a challenge to find work. Once the recession hit in 2009, our focus changed as our clients needed help and support in finding employment. So we not only started helping them to find jobs, but also where appropriate, supported them to move into self-employment and open a business if this was the direction they were looking to go into. Move on to 2016, and we opened the Wehub shared community office space building, which is a fantastic space for business people to rent a desk or an office. And once the social distancing rules have been relaxed, also for people to hot desk again through a Wehub membership scheme. And now fast forward to 2021. Wow. What a year and a half. And like everyone, not a time that anyone expected or predicted back in early 2020. It is fair to say that the pandemic has had a major impact on businesses and also the employment landscape. We have all had to adapt to new ways of living, new technology, combining homeschooling with work, flexible working patterns, and for many being forced into trying to adapt their business or cope with the new way of life or having to find a job. We hope that for those of you that have become Work Avenue clients this year, that we have supported you in what might have been a rocky journey. As a team, we have also had to adopt to offering all of our services online. So providing all of our one-to-one business advice and career guidance meetings over Zoom, as well as running our workshops and events online, all of which on the whole seem to have been run smoothly. Clearly, it goes without saying that if anyone here would like to book a bespoke one-to-one meeting with any of the team, please do be in touch via email or phone and we will set up a time for you to meet with us. As you have seen by signing up to Startup Central, the theme of this year's conference is Innovate, Inform, Inspire. And Work Avenue hasn't stood still this year. In fact, it is fair to say that in our own way, we feel that we have been working hard to innovate and develop new services for our clients. Our most innovative new initiative, in my opinion, is our wage social enterprise, which is being run by Jeremy Bonn, who is waving now, if you can see him waving now. Wage aims to both create employment and grow businesses by training a workforce to support small businesses in key areas so they too can grow and develop. We are training people in 6 disciplines: bookkeeping, digital marketing, web design, graphic design, IT and admin, sales, and customer service. So if you are a business that needs a project delivered in one of these 6 disciplines, then please do be in touch with Jeremy. And we hope that we may be able to find you a wage member who can help you to grow your business at an affordable rate. We have also launched the Richard Mintz Bursary Fund for training. This fund provides bursaries to those wishing to train for a new career. It has been designed to help those wishing to improve their earning potential, but who are prevented from doing so due to the expense of training courses. So far, we are really pleased to have helped 33 people and have funded courses to the tune of over £67,000, and we are accepting new applications now. Despite the health, lifestyle, and economic challenges that we have all had to face this year, I was really keen for this conference to be an event that looks forward and provides hope rather than dwells on what went wrong. So I'm very excited that we have so many excellent speakers who will share their stories, which I hope will inspire you and make you consider how to grow, move forwards, or change direction. In addition to the speakers, I also wanted to share some other examples of how some of the clients that myself and Kim have met this year and how they have adapted. So a quick shout out to the event catering client that pivoted to offering restaurant style meals, boxed teas via home delivery. The recruitment business that started providing COVID safety signs and equipment for officers. The personal trainer who went straight to offering classes online. The DJ who set up a digital marketing agency. The bookkeeper who launched a side business of a portable undercoat hood to protect against the rain. And the person who have been in corporate life for over 25 years set up her own compliance consultancy. All of this is so inspiring and goes to show that people really have made the best out of a challenging situation. However, don't just take my word for it. A surge in startups, according to a report in the Financial Times in May of this year, there have been more than 810,000 business incorporations in the UK, which is a 22% increase on the same period last year. And the 221,000 companies incorporated in the third quarter of last year was the highest figure of the past decade. So self-employment and innovation really seems to be taking off and alive in the UK. Industries that showed the greatest increases in business creations in the first quarter compared with the same period last year were retail, wholesale, and logistics. And these were consistent with a rise in new businesses trying to address the increased need for online shopping and home delivery services. So as I said, there is clearly a lot of hope on the horizon. On this note, I am now really excited to officially open the conference and in a moment you will hear from our keynote speakers. You should have all received the schedule for today's event with all of the Zoom links for the different sessions. But just to recap, at 10:30, you can either join a session with Nick Rabin, who is Head of Insight at Pizza Hut, explaining how customer insight helps you as a business innovate and move forwards, or alternatively, listen to two young entrepreneurs, Kate Hoffman of Grow Up Farms and Stephen Moses of Zen Plans, talk through how they came up with the ideas for their businesses. And we thank Adam Ginogly, a former MD at BlackRock, for facilitating this session. We'll have a short break from 11:20 to 11:30. And at 11:30, there will be a chance to join one of 3 breakout rooms and ask questions of experts in either accountancy, law, web design, graphic design, content writing, brand comms, paid Google ads, and social media. So thank you to Hannah Kalichi, Ilana Menachemson, Marc Mazur, Deborah Grunberger, Natalie Stone, Lisa Woodward, Stephen Mills, and Evie Miller for providing their expert advice. And then at 12:15, you can either join Sasha Fries, CEO of The Business Narrative, and Batsheva Netzer, founder of B7 Diet and B7 Active, talk through how they have both grown and adapted their businesses over the past year. Or listen to Paul Charles, CEO of the PC Travel Consultancy Agency, who made the leap from corporate life to starting his own business, as well as being responsible this year for the Save Our Summer travel campaign. Finally, at 1 o'clock, there will be 30 minutes to network and schmooze in our networking breakout rooms. So now, without further ado, a big hello and thank you to our keynote speakers, Rachel Anticoni, who is the COO of the Royal Free Hospital, and Marc Southern, who is founder of a medical startup called Bob Health. I felt that given the NHS has been such a focus this year, it would be really interesting to hear how organisations that have been truly been part of the front line have had to adapt to new ways of working. Please do put your questions in the chat and we will try our best to enjoy them. to answer them, sorry, in joy. I am now going to hand over to Rachel and Marc. But I would like to, first of all, Rachel and Marc, thank you very, very much for your time. Please, could you give us a potted history of your careers to date, and then we will obviously move on to questions. So I'm going to pin Rachel, and I'm going to pin, so please do take yourself off mute to say hello. It's lovely to see you both. Thank you.
Hi, Jo.
Hi, Rachel. And I'm going to try and find Marc as well. Where's Marc? Here.
Thanks, Joanna.
Oh, lovely. Nice to see you.
Good morning, everybody.
Morning.
So, Rachel, first of all, handing over to you.
Thanks, Jo, and thank you so much for inviting me. It's a real pleasure to be here, and always nice when the public sector is invited to be part of a more corporate commercial enterprise as well. Just the lessons that we can learn from commercial sector, as well as the lessons learned the other way around. And I think, Jo, you wanted us just to give a quick potted history of our career to date. Just in a nutshell, I started life as a nurse, but had quite an untraditional career path, and worked in the emergency relief world, mainly in East and Central Africa, for quite a few years, working in war zones and with refugee and displaced communities, which I suppose sort of gave me a bit of resilience for working in the NHS. And between then and now, I've worked in the private sector, in the charitable sector, usually in healthcare or social care, and usually working in some sort of operational or logistical role. More recently, I was the director of a hospice, and then became Chief Operating Officer at the North Middlesex Hospital in North London, and now same in the Royal Free Hospital, London. Jo, I don't know if you wanted me just to go on and just give a little bit of sort of background to focusing on the last year, or certainly the first surge now, or whether we go to Marc.
Sure. Let's go to Marc to do an overview of him, and then we'll come back to you to do to give an overview. Thank you, Rachel.
So thanks again, Joanna. Thanks for having me along here. So my background is, I originally really wanted to be a doctor, actually. Quite honestly, I didn't get the grades. So I ended up studying pharmacology at university, and following that, I did a little stint traveling, and actually ended up in Australia working for a company that was selling autograph memorabilia, like signed cricket bats, footballs, etc. And it was kind of around the time of when eBay and QXL and all the online auction houses were just kind of starting to gain prominence. And at the time, it was obvious that, to build their business, you had to move everything online. And this is at the time when online was very basic. But for me, that activity of kind of starting to sell online and connecting with other people around the world and shipping cricket bats to the other side of the US was actually quite important to me, and really kind of galvanized in my head the importance of digital communication. But being completely honest with you, as I said, I wanted to be a doctor. So really selling, stuff online to people around the world, cricket bats and so on, really didn't do it for me. It didn't really have the purpose. So I was looking at doing something with a bit more purpose and meaning, and healthcare was always something I was always interested in, especially the sciences. So I looked at getting back into that, and the way I did that was I ended up taking a job at a pharmaceutical company called Aventis. They're now Sanofi, and I worked in pharma companies for a number of years, and the kind of roles I was working in were very much that intersection between digital communications, digital platforms, and healthcare. And so that took on a variety of marketing, medical/marketing roles. And I ended up working there for a few years, moved into another field of healthcare, into molecular diagnostics, working for a startup there selling tests, actually PCR-based tests. You're very well of PCR now, PCR-based tests. And then I worked for an online channel for healthcare professionals in the UK for GPs called On Medica, which still exists now, but it's a different business. And then the rest of my career I spent consulting with the NHS directly, with NGOs, charities, and the pharmaceutical industry. And there I was really doing a similar kind of job. I was really trying to help people understand the best way of using digital products, solutions to fit their problems. And then I was working with a consultancy owned by my co-founder, a guy called Neil Crump, who started to tell me about some of the problems he had seen in the NHS and in pharma industry and in other aligned industries. And that was kind of the precursor to joining Bob, really, which I'll talk about in a bit, but that was kind of my journey. So pretty much mostly healthcare and mostly digital is my background.
Fabulous, thank you. So that's really interesting, thank you. And I'm sure there's still some of those cricket bats around somewhere in the world, Marc.
Some in my loft, which my wife wants me to get rid of. But yeah,
oh, right, okay. We'll stay off that subject. Rachel, do you want to share the screen? Do you want me to share? I can make you.
I can share. I'm happy to do that.
Lovely. Okay. So
thank you.
Yeah.
So I was just going to just give a little bit of context. I was going to just give a context about what the first surge of COVID was like last year. Really talking from about February right through to about June. Just to put it into context, the Royal Free Hospital is an inner London teaching hospital. We have about 500 beds, and at our peak we had more than 400 COVID positive patients in our hospital. That was during the first surge. As part of the Royal Free London group, we also include Barnet Hospital in that, and they had nearly 300 positive patients at the time. And I just thought it'd be really helpful just to, if I just share my screen now. Can everybody see that?
Yep.
Just gone and taken away. Ah, good. Now I can. Okay. I just thought that it looked a bit sort of mountainous in terms of the number of patients that we had. Back on 9th of February, we were one of the first hospitals to admit a COVID positive patient. It was much earlier than anybody else. The Royal Free specialises in infectious diseases. A lot of Ebola patients, you know, we're used to having a really high security infectious diseases unit here. And the first thing that we were trying to do was contain COVID in the hospital. By the 2nd of March, we'd set up a gold command in terms of, we really got into a command and control sort of management situation at that point, because it was like having a major incident happening every single day. I've written that we had a Q&A with our staff in our atrium. I mean, it's bizarre now thinking that we had about 500 staff in a very, very large room, admittedly, but no masks at the time and all standing quite close together, trying to reassure the staff of what our plan was and how we were going to manage. By the 9th of March, COVID Cobra had been set up, and we'd put in work streams to deal with workforce, our elective surgery and all those sort of things. We set up an advice line soon after, and on the 16th of March, that was when pubs and restaurants in the UK shut. We opened up our incident centre so that we were really working as part of a major incident there. And by the 21st of March, we suspended all our planned surgery except for cancer surgery. We're a very big cancer treatment centre at the Royal Free. And on the 23rd of March, lockdown began. We then set up, you may or may not remember, there was all the empty shelves issue at the end of March, and a lot of our staff were finding they were finishing a shift and finding there was no food in the shops. So we began setting up free food in our canteens. We stopped any visitors from coming in. And just bizarrely and coincidentally, the BBC began filming for episodes of Hospital. programme then. So as things were really taking off, I had a camera crew on my shoulder for the next 6 weeks. We moved our intensive care unit into like a ward area. We have 34 intensive care beds normally, and we were asked to prepare to surge to about 70 or 80 beds, so almost tripling our ITU capacity. We then set up a free supermarket for Royal Free Hospital staff, which was a lovely thing to do. So donated goods, including toilet paper, vegetables, you name it, so that staff could work as many hours on the front line, but then didn't have to worry about shopping for families, and they could just take what they needed. That was also the same day as the Nightingale Hospital opening. We cancelled Easter on the 6th of April, and at that point we had 1,100 staff off sick, which is a significant amount when you're trying to surge up the numbers of beds for our patients. We had a problem with our oxygen tanks. We found out that when you have more than 400 patients on site, all requiring huge amounts of oxygen, that actually oxygen then begins to run out. So we got another tank installed. We set up a production line for hand sanitizer. You'll remember that all ran out as well. So our pharmacy began producing that. And on the 11th, 12th of May, the BBC actually aired their hospital special on that day, which was actually BAFTA nominated, which we were very proud of as well. And on the 13th of May, 100 of our staff, thank goodness, returned from the Nightingale and really helped us try and get back to normal and try and manage the rest of that surge, but also try and begin restore services. And by the end of May, we shut our free supermarket. I just took a photograph yesterday as I was walking. This is in our ITU departments. It's a very dull, gloomy corridor that we have. And we added, we put up all the messages and thanks from all the children, from all the schools around us who sent in just wonderful messages of hope for our staff. And I couldn't resist adding that in. So I just wanted to just add that so that you had an idea of where we were up to and what we did. Thanks for that, Jo.
Just a quick question before we move on to Marc, and then I'll come back to questions for both of you. How did the surge continue? You know, the second wave over kind of December, and was that similar in terms of number of patients and number of ITU beds that were?
Yeah, so in the first surge, we went up from 34 ITU beds to 75 ITU beds. And in the second surge, which happened between December and February, we went up to 98 intensive care beds. If you think, you know, we don't have 98 intensive care nurses hanging around waiting, you know, so we had to begin training up other staff to try and sort of reduce our ratios, but make sure we still had a member of staff by each bed, and then used our intensivists to work between 3 beds. So officially, our ratios of nurse to patient ratio went from a 1-to-1, which is intensive care level, that's why it's intensive, to about a 1-to-3 and sometimes 1-to-4. It was really, really stressful for the staff, and just putting it in, you know, so we had staff from other areas of the hospital that had to help out. But just to put it into context, it's a bit like, you know, intensive care is a specialty. Just because you're a nurse, I'm a nurse, you know, working in intensive care is a completely different ballgame. You know, the tech that's used, everything is digitized. The sort of observations you're making are very, very different. And it's like asking, you know, a corporate lawyer to just go and work in family law for the next 2 months. You know, it's a completely different specialty, completely different discipline. So very, very stressful for the staff.
I can't even imagine what you've all had to deal with. Thank you so much for sharing that kind of that insight. Marc, shall we move on to you, and you can give a nice kind of explanation of Bob Health? Are you happy to share your screen, or yeah?
Yeah, absolutely. While I'm doing that, just to say, yeah, that was a really interesting story, Rachel, from your perspective there at the Royal Free. And it's being in Bob, it's a story I've heard a number of times from various NHS sites, and it's just, yeah, it's just amazing what's been done, and certainly recently with the vaccine as well. I think it's just, yeah, applause to all of you guys, because honestly, it's been amazing. So hopefully, right, can you see my full screen? And it's taking a while. The computer's decided to run slow. You're probably just seeing a black screen right now. Okay, can you see that?
It's not coming up yet. But
yeah,
it was there before. Funny enough, before you press the slideshow. Okay.
Bit. You know what I'll do? I'll just try again. Try that.
There we are.
Okay. Okay. Super. So Bob. So what's Bob all about? Bob is all about, the problem that we're trying to solve is something which I've seen from more of the commercial side of suppliers interacting with the NHS, but also through the work I've done with the NHS, it's a problem I've seen many a time. And this problem is when someone embarks upon a new project, and let's say it's a change project, let's say it's doing something new in your organization, let's say it's bringing in maybe a new innovation or a new way of doing things, a new process, could even be a new rota. Usually what happens is, and this is not just me saying this, this is through hundreds of interviews we've conducted with people in the NHS, the first thing you do is, well, has someone else done this before? Can I save time and not reinvent the wheel? And usually people embark upon that journey, they go to Google, they search, they try and find someone somewhere else out there in the NHS done something related so that they can learn from them. Usually what happens is, for the most part, is people don't find what they're looking for. If they do find information and they're lucky, they tend to try and find the person, an email, a telephone number, and they'll give them a call. They'll, in the old days, go out for a coffee, and they would chat about the project. And through that conversation, people would have much more knowledge about the pitfalls they should watch out for, how to get certain approvals, how to work through a process, the practical details. But basically, it's the human things that take place in a project that are really important. And that's what people tend to discover during those conversations. People describe those things as, what were the nuggets? What were the rabbit holes to watch out for? All of the kind of, sometimes the messy things that get in the way. And the problem that we're trying to solve is ultimately it's because what we discovered is not finding information about a project that's happened before that's similar to your own can hold you back. It can slow you down, but also in finding out that information, there's an incredible amount of efficiency that can be gained there by not replicating what went wrong, but also by reusing materials that were created. You can shortcut a lot of that time to start your own project. So really, Bob is all about doing that. And the reason why it's called Bob, which is something we always get asked, is it's kind of Bob is representation of the person that you always go to in your organization, has that kind of institutional memory. And you say, hey, we did a project on whatever it was years ago. Where is that? It's like, oh yeah, let's dig that out. And there you go. So that's why it's Bob. And that's really the problem we're trying to solve. And the way we do that is we help people capture their experiences in an easy way. And so what do I mean by that? And to show you the next screen. So on the left-hand side, you can see this is just a representation of what we call our writing engine. And really what that is a series, it's a process we take people through on our platform. So the first thing to say is that Bob is free for all NHS staff, health and social care staff, and some charities as well. And what we enable people to do is they can come onto Bob and they can work through this writing engine on the left, and we've got a series of questions and prompts that have been guided by interviews we've conducted with people in the NHS that kind of tease out the key things in a project that someone that's looking to do this similar project would want to know. So it's focused on those key questions. And then once they've gone through that process, they've got the approvals from their team and made sure it's all compliant, it can then get published on the site. And on the right-hand side, you can see an example of one of the stories we've got on the platform. Surprise, surprise, about rolling out digital consultations during COVID. But this is the way it looks on the platform. So someone that's looking for information can stumble upon Bob. They can go and read about the details of how a project was conducted, and they can flick through and they can find the relevant information. They can share it with their teams, and they can also ask the author a question to get more information about the project. So the idea is we're trying to really scale up that individual one-on-one conversation that people would have and make it more accessible to more people across the NHS. Ultimately, the aim is to improve efficiencies, improve patient outcomes, and make things more efficient within the NHS. So that, in a nutshell, is really what we do.
Excellent.
Okay.
Thanks, Marc. So just let me ask, as a from a commercial point of view, because I understand it is a commercial organisation, how do you actually make money, or what's the concept of and when did you kind of set it up? Because what was the launch time, i.e. from the idea to actually launching it?
Yeah, so we started off, Neil, my co-founder, and I had been discussing the business since 2018. And we realized, we thought, first of all, we tried to do it without going full time. We just kind of lumbered along, keeping our jobs, as you should do, actually. Good advice to do that, keep the salary coming in. But at some point we realized it was just not, we just couldn't move things on if we were doing that. So kind of around about, it was January 2019, we both decided to go full time in the business. We quit our jobs, took a leap of faith, and used the savings. And we then also, so we started to move the business on, and our key goal we knew was to try and raise some money, which we did around October 2019. We did around October 2019. And at that time we brought in a team of 6, which we still have now. And we actually launched the product right in the midst of the first wave of COVID, actually. So we launched the product in April. We actually planned to launch it in July of that year, but we condensed down our development timelines so that we could get something out there which we believed we could help the NHS during that surge. And the other question is, how do we make money? So the example I showed you of the story is a story which is generated from the NHS. But the other problem which I haven't mentioned is Nhs Suppliers have a similar but different problem, in that if they've got a new product that's approved to be used, let's say it's a medicine or even a technology, it's approved to be used, people in the NHS are allowed to use it, but it's just not getting the adoption that it should be getting. And sometimes that is about just understanding how it can be used effectively, or a process of using it in the right way. Could be education, could be a number of reasons. And so for Nhs Suppliers, there is an interest to make sure that the right information is available to people in the NHS, so that they can learn these things and help them improve and adopt the service, the technology, whatever it is. So what we do is we offer those Nhs Suppliers the chance to sponsor a story. So where an NHS supplier has gone into the NHS, into a particular site, say it was the Royal Free, for example, and there was a new technology they had introduced there, and it had worked really well. There was a benefit to the NHS, maybe in savings or in patient outcomes, where that works well, and the NHS supplier is also generating a benefit. Then in those situations, we believe that that example should be showcased. And so we give the NHS suppliers the opportunity to do that, so they can sponsor a story. It's still written from the NHS author, the lead in the project. So everything is still from the perspective of the NHS person that actually worked on the project. But what it enables the company to do is it enables the company to share best practice in what we believe is an authentic and credible way, because it's from the view of the person who actually adopted it versus the company doing a marketing piece out there. So that's the way we make money. So we charge NHS suppliers to do that, and that enables us to keep our core service free for the NHS. Thank
you. I guess keeping on the theme and trying to link you both together, I guess a question that I'd like to ask Rachel is, what was the most kind of innovative process that you had to put in place because of COVID, and then one that, because I guess you were all learning about it, weren't you? So what did you have to kind of put in place, and therefore what might be a good story that Bob could share, for example?
So I think, like with many organisations, it became very creative, because a lot of the bureaucracy that normally holds us back was sort of cut away. For a couple of years, I'd been trying, along with my colleagues, to try and move a lot of our outpatients to become virtual outpatients. And I'd spent 2 years, it was really difficult, had lots of blocks, people just were not engaged, people did not believe that it was working, in the same way that we heard that, virtual GPs in Babylon it hadn't taken off so well. And of course, COVID hits, and I managed to get 40% of our outpatients online in the first 3 weeks, because it was the only way we were going to do it. I suppose what we've learned is that, it works to an extent. We're a teaching hospital, we're a specialist teaching hospital, so a lot of our patients are not local, and having to get on the train down from Newcastle to see a vascular surgeon or a liver transplant surgeon when you're actually feeling pretty unwell is not that easy. So to do it virtually is great. We could do some of it, but not all of it. That is certainly something that an innovation that we will keep going. We had to set up things like virtual visiting because we stopped all relatives coming to the hospital. Actually there's something about learning about the engagement that we need with relatives, and how we do that in a better way. Staffing was one of our biggest challenges, and we looked to see who else we could use. And in fact, we linked in with a load of diver medics. These are people that work in caves and potholes. They're really good. They know their respiratory stuff really well. They're used to looking at dials and stuff, and we trained them up, did a massively very quick up to speed course in working in intensive care, but they were not fearful at all, and within sort of about 3 days, and they're used to being deployed very quickly to work in emergency situations. So within 3 days, we had 20 diver medics that were able to work round the clock, which really helped. So that's just some of the innovations that we used.
Amazing. So look, just staying with you, Rachel, for a second. I mean, obviously the NHS and really even the Royal Free, which was part of that, is a juggernaut of a organisation. I mean, how did you manage to implement all of the different kind of flexible working practices, and what kind of flexible working arrangements did you need to put in place that we would have to kind of adapt to?
Well, it is very large. It's 10,000 staff here. And obviously a lot of what we do is patient facing and face to face. So you can't be that flexible. You need X number of nurses in X places at certain times and shifts, with a lot of staff going off sick. But anybody who wasn't essential didn't need to be on site. But we don't have, all our funds are from the taxpayer. It's very difficult to, we have to be really careful about that money. So trying to get people to work from home very quickly was quite difficult, actually. But we did manage it it took a few months, just to try and keep as many people out of the hospital, which was a COVID area, as much as possible. And, it really taught us that it's not just about backsides on seats. You don't have to be in the room, you can be in a virtual room. And that was really, really helpful. Pre-COVID, trying to get a load of surgeons to talk together is very difficult when they're all doing a theatre list or they're in clinics or whatever. However, doing a Zoom call, at 8 o'clock in the morning, they can tap into some of it, whereas they never used to be able to come. They'd be working on different sites or whatever. So really making the use or the best use of digital and tech was just a lifesaver for us.
You just answered my question. Was it Zoom or Teams?
We've used both. I mean, okay. Teams is more secure, right. Certainly for patient confidential information.
Yeah. And Marc, you're obviously the complete opposite of a juggernaut organisation. You say 6 people. I mean, how does being a small startup kind of help, but also hinder you as an organisation?
Yeah, I think the first thing was, so before COVID, we were in a shoebox in Camden, actually. And so as soon as lockdown, was announced, there was no realistic way we could actually ever be in the office. I mean, it was bad enough before. So going virtual was actually quite straightforward for us, because we actually had hired, we had 5 initially, and then we hired our quality manager, Nick Folk, actually about a week before lockdown. So she was always going to be a remote worker. So for us, actually, we were already in that mindset, so we could do all those things fairly quickly. But I'd say that the biggest challenges were still around, for us, were around communication. So it wasn't necessarily innovative practice we changed, but the key thing we realized was there was a lot of uncertainty. You know, we were planning to launch our product in July of 2020. And this kind of, you know, scuppered us a fair bit, because a large chunk of work we were doing was working with people in the NHS to get feedback on what we were doing. And we realized pretty quickly that that time was disappearing and we wouldn't get that. And we were just worried about what we were going to do. So for us, it was very much around over communicating with the team. So we implemented morning and evening calls, which seems like a bit overkill now, but actually at the time it felt like the right thing to do, just to be face to face, well, virtual face to face with people, when maybe video calls are more of an exciting thing to do and less of a drain. But it certainly that's what we did. And I think the benefit of being a small team is you could just do that easy. You could get 6 of you around a video call, you could do it morning and evening, and you could go through the key things that mattered. So for us, that was good, because the benefit, I would say, for a startup is that we can make quick decisions, we can move on things immediately if we needed to. But the downside of that is then, where do you stop? Where do you prioritize? You know, if you can do everything quickly and someone's got an idea and by the end of the day someone can implement it, that's great. But it also means that people can go off and do loads of different things. So I think, as good as that is for us, prioritization of what we were doing and real laser focus was a real challenge. Certainly back in the days of March, April in 2020, when we were, you know, wanting to still get our product live, knew that there were challenges in doing that. So for us, it was about over communicating at that time was a real benefit.
Good, thank you. And I mean, everybody says, don't they, that kind of communication. I mean, I know we were all having kind of daily team meetings as well, which, as you say, you know, kind of felt a bit overkill. But on the other hand, otherwise you're just all working in complete silos. Rachel, it must have been kind of, as COO, one of the biggest challenges that you've, I guess, ever faced in your career. You know, what was the biggest challenge that you faced during that first surge last year? How did you cope with it mentally? Because, you know, I always think it's from a kind of, you know, running a business, there's such the mental impact of it. How did you cope with that?
It's a good question. I suppose the thing to remember is, as a huge organisation, we're very well prepared for incidents and major incidents. You know, we drill it all the time, and there's, you know, very regularly, if, you know, I don't know, big collisions, terrorist attacks, scaffolding falling outside the Royal Free, power failures. I think the year before last we had a big water pipe that burst nearby, and we had only an hour's worth of water left in the hospital. We're used to dealing with big emergencies that affect the whole hospital and our whole patient population, really. And we're used to dealing with that. We also have big pandemic plans that are drawn up as part of our major incident stuff. And those were originally drawn up for things like swine flu, SARS, and things like that. But I think nobody could ever have anticipated the impact of a global pandemic. And you know, that we never ran out of PPE, for example, but we came perilously close on a few occasions. So you know, it was incredibly stressful. We all found it very stressful. We are, you know, all taught, and we you know, go through this again and again, that in times, you know, during, I don't know, Grenfell disaster or 7/7 terrorist attacks, you know you can't keep going, and we're really clear about how we hand over, and we have a gold, silver, bronze command, and we have incident rooms and all this sort of thing, and you know you have to take your break. Usually, though, you know, there's a big incident, and it takes 3 to 7 days before you're back to normal, and then everybody pats each other on the back and goes down to the pub and has a drink, and we talk about it, laugh, cry, whatever, and it's all over. And of course, this has just continued and not stopped. So, you know, unfortunately, for the first about 6 weeks, so from about middle of March until the beginning of May, most of us were working 7 days a week, 14-hour days, which obviously takes its toll and is not the right thing to do. And that was sort of, some of it was about fear and anxiety, really understanding as a leader when you do need to role model and you need the visibility and when you don't, but also recognising we're all human, trusting our teams, because I have a fantastic team around me. When I talk about the hospital and what I've faced, it's what my whole team and the whole hospital has faced. I certainly do not claim to do this on my own and could not do it on my own. You know, and it was very, very difficult, and you know, it did take its toll, did take a personal toll on me and my health. But it's about, you know, it's what we learned ready for the second surge, and we were so much better second time around. It was so much easier to let go and give other people the opportunity to step up, give other people, it's really important for teams to have that responsibility, and because people really do step up and people really want to help. Nobody comes to work thinking they don't want to do a good job. So it gave a lot of opportunities, but I can't pretend it didn't take its toll. And on the staff as well, we had, you know, now when we're in a recovery and restoration phase and we're trying to manage the backlog, huge backlog of patients who have not had their surgical procedures in 15, 18 months. Actually, a lot of staff who were going to either retire and return have now decided they don't want to return. A lot of our staff, especially our anaesthetic and intensive care staff, are saying, actually, I now want to reduce my days from 5 days to 3 days, because people are absolutely burnt out and tired. So that's sort of a new challenge that we need to face. But those are certainly some of the big challenges and the sort of the way we tried to cope with it.
Thank you for that. And just obviously, in fact, it's kind of part of a question that David Greenberg's written on the chat. But just before I go to Marc, you know, if Bob were to share kind of learnings that you know put in place, you said you were able to handle surge, the wave 2 better than, you know, the first surge. What would those key learnings be that he might be able to share as part of a story on his platform?
Well, I think, you know, one of the things that really sort of, I suppose, it was a real catalyst for us, you know, to begin working much more closely with other hospitals in the sector. You know, we're all working for the same organisation, the NHS, but have worked quite in a silo fashion up until now. So in terms of the mutual aid that we were able to bring to each other was fantastic, and able to make some buildings, some hospitals completely clean and COVID secure, while other hospitals like ours that has a big A&E obviously needs to be kept, you know, sort of clean, discrete COVID pathways. So it's those sort of learnings that you wouldn't want to start from scratch again. And, you know, at the end of the day, a lot of what we've learned is based on relationships and building those relationships and building the trust and realizing this is not about, you know, my hospital and my patients. This is our hospitals and our patients, and what is the best way to manage them. And of course, you know, specialties, you know, medical specialties, surgical specialties, you know, everybody get quite protective because everybody thinks they're more special than everybody else, and therefore, you know, we want to be looking after this group of patients rather than giving them to another hospital. It's for the right, it's best interest of the patients, but probably now looking back, not the best way to manage patients. And that's something that we've really learned and is now in place, so that we can share our patients to try and smooth the demand and share the capacity that we have.
Thank you. And Marc, I mean, what would you say, Marc, your biggest challenge? You know, I guess it's completely different, but from a startup, what would you, as a co-founder, what's your biggest challenge?
It's interesting hearing Rachel talk about, and certainly the first wave and the kind of challenges, certainly with staff. I think that was almost like a mirror reflection into our world, because actually, that rightly so, you know, people weren't available to talk to us about a new product which they never heard of before. So we had about 20, 25 people in the NHS from various different roles who were willing to work with us and co-create our platform and do all that work. And, literally overnight, that disappeared. So we had to think of other ways to be creative about, being respectful of people's time and still getting the answers we needed. And the other challenge was we thought at that time that, we kind of had the bare bones of a platform by March, April time. And like I said, we were planning to launch in July. So the biggest challenge we had was, do we accelerate our development and try and launch something because it might be beneficial to the NHS, or do we just wait and see what happens? And so we made the decision to jump in and accelerate our development timeline. So originally we were launching in July. We actually ended up building the site in 3 weeks, which was hideous. It was very stressful. It was crazy, but we at the time we thought it was needed. And I think one of the biggest challenges we had was not the building the site. We kind of knew what we were doing there. It was stressful, it's hard, but we did it. The biggest challenges we had was then when we launched, it was then, right, we thought we were doing the right thing, launching in the middle of a pandemic so we could help. But of course, as Rachel's put, people just did not have time to do this. And it was very, very hard initially to get the kind of traction that we thought we might have got. And so challenges for us were kind of chasing around, trying to do 50 different things and trying to work out what worked. And again, prioritization goes back to that for us. It was the same thing. And it was, the NHS is vast. Everyone does different things. There's different disciplines. There's politics, there's culture, there's so many different aspects to it. And I think launching in the middle of a pandemic, possibly the worst possible time to ever launch a healthcare product. But there were some positives that came out of it too, in that, it did get us some awareness. People saw the benefits, although they might not have been able to use it straight away. They saw and they acknowledged the fact that we should share more, as Rachel says, breaking down silos, showing that kind of information. So the principles of what we're trying to do at Bob kind of resonated with people. So there was lots of positives. Challenges were just purely around getting people's time and being creative around how to capture people's insights that we needed to build our platform in the right way.
Can I just stick with you, Marc, for a minute? Because I know a lot of people who are on here are so far the other side of Rachel in terms of having, either a one man, one woman, one person business. How did you go from being the kind of 2 co-founders to recruiting? Like, what was the decision that you had to make to recruit? When you start recruiting and having to pay people, what would your advice be?
So we held out as long as we could, depleted savings, both of us, from January until October, really. That was all on us. And there's only so much 2 people can do. So naturally for us, we always knew we needed people, more people in the team to do more of the work. So we knew that was coming. And predominantly it was around, we use a development agency to do most of our dev work. The 6 staff we have are made up of a product manager. We have a quality manager who's an ex-NHS employee, pharmacist. And then we have others that work in more kind of account manager roles, but actually they do a lot of everything. And I think for us, it was about trying to find people that are basically willing to get stuck into absolutely every aspect of work, no matter what it was. And I think certainly for us, the early staff members had to believe in the vision that we have for Bob, which is really about trying to improve patient outcomes, patient experience within the NHS. And so for us, the way we hired, it was very much a kind of value-based hire. So we have 4 values, which are being kind, resilient, collaborative, and trustworthy. And we identified those primarily because we're a healthcare business and we work with healthcare professionals. So we wanted to mirror what the NHS believes are its values. And also, it's hard what we're doing. And we're going to have to take a lot of knocks being a startup. So resilience is really important. So we worked with a startup advisor at the time. And actually, this was something that we discussed together. And so we obviously did the usual skill-based interview stuff, but actually what we found was really interesting was really drilling down into our values and actually saying to ourselves, would we hire and fire someone based upon these values? What would it take for us to fire someone if they didn't adhere to these values? What would that look like? So we spent loads of time going through thinking of examples of what it could be. And then when we spoke to people, we kind of had those things in our minds. So we were looking for cues, and when we sought references, we were looking for those kind of things to really help build a picture up of that person. Because, skills are one thing, but actually, as I said, people are doing everything. So really for us, it was about those values and whether we knew we had a strong team from the beginning. And also, if we're going to build to that, those early employees are they're a really important aspect of the company, because not only do they help get us to that next level, but also if we're recruiting more people, they look at those employees and they see that strong culture and identity that we've built up. And that's really important for building out our business in the long term, to make sure we've got those kinds of people with the same kind of values in the future. So for us, as we grow our team, obviously there was people need to do the work, but also it's about how do we not disrupt the culture of the team, knowing that also we're working, like I said, with the NHS and with others in the healthcare space. So we have to be very careful about the kind of person that we bring in there as well, to make sure it doesn't scupper what we want to build and grow. So yeah, that would be my thoughts on that.
Thank you. Judith just said, can you remind us what are the 4 values?
Yeah, sure. So kindness, collaborativeness, resilience, and trustworthy. Trustworthy.
Thank you. And I just want to tell everybody we've got 10 minutes until we finish. So if I've got another question from David, and I've also had another question about the film crew, which I'm going to ask you, Rachel. But if anybody's got any questions, please do put them in the chat, because we'll be finishing this session at 10:25. So Rachel, on the kind of flip side from you, are there any practices that you employ within the NHS that you think would be useful for a small business to employ? What would you say?
Well, I mean, I would really agree with what Marc was just saying about, even though we're a huge organisation in comparison, people matter. And again, we're using taxpayers' money to pay these people, so it feels like a big responsibility. But my advice is always take your time to recruit the right person. And sometimes you try and hold off recruiting because you want to save that money, whether you're a big organisation or a small one. And then it all happens really quickly, and you then kind of just need someone in place, or it feels like that. But I would really strongly advise it can take a few weeks to get somebody in. It can take 18 months to manage them out if they are not the right person. And it becomes, the last thing you think about when you go to bed, and the first thing you think about when you wake up, if you've made a bad choice. So my advice, of whatever size of the organisation, your people are your greatest asset, and certainly when it comes to the front line. And I spend a very long time making sure that we've chosen the right people. When it comes to when we recruit consultants, they are jobs for life. So you're recruiting somebody for the next 20 years usually. So we take a very, very long time to make sure we are recruiting the right person. And as Marc said, we also align with values, making sure it's value driven. We do a lot of in our interviews, a lot of it is scenario based, and how people can reflect how they've done something similar or approached something similar with their past experience, rather than just saying, what is this, what is that, the stuff you can just read off a CV. But it's really trying to get down. And also we don't just do one interview, we'll often do a couple, we'll do some stakeholder sessions to get people to, it's not a popularity contest, but it's really trying to explore whether that person is right for the organisation, whether they hold the same values, and that, you trust them to get on and do stuff. We've got, we don't have the time to sort of babysit individuals, and I'm sure Marc doesn't either, when you're trying to do a huge amount of work with just very few people. So it's really, I would say that it's absolutely the most important thing is getting the team right.
Just to ask you, Rachel, to stick with you, obviously, what was it like having a film crew in the Royal Free? And actually somebody has said, obviously in the first surge, when everything was being cancelled, how come they still allowed, or you still allowed the BBC to film in the hospital?
So we'd already agreed for them to be on site before the surge happened. They were going to do the hospital programme. and obviously happened to be in the right place at the right time. It felt, it was a big decision to make because we were stopping relatives from coming, yet we had a BBC film crew, but we knew that they were going to speed up the editing time and finish filming at the end of April and get it out by the second week of May. And we felt very strongly that it was going to become sort of like a public health documentary on what was happening, that we were an example of what was happening across the whole of the UK. And we felt that that was the right decision to make at the time. They paid for their own PPE and were really clear about that sort of thing. It was really difficult. I mean, they literally were on my shoulder, and they had sort of 6 crews around the hospital, but were on my shoulder for most of that 6 weeks. So they had access to everything. They heard a lot of things which they probably shouldn't have heard. There was one particular time when we were running out of oxygen. It was very, very stressful, and they were filming a phone conversation that I was having with a number of intensive care staff, engineers, oxygen engineers, estate staff and nurses. And they were talking about, the engineers were talking tech stuff. I felt I was becoming an oxygen specialist, and I didn't really understand what they were saying. So I said, just explain to me, when you say the oxygen, we're going to have a drop in oxygen, does that mean that the pressure is going to gradually decrease so that people that are on oxygen are going to just feel it, or are we going to have a catastrophic cutout? And they said, we're going to have a catastrophic cutout. And of course, I'm being filmed. And you can imagine what most people's reaction to be when you're responsible for 500 beds and you're being told the oxygen is just going to cut out. That's the worst case scenario. And of course, my usual reaction is probably not for this, well, it certainly wasn't for the film. But of course, I know there's a camera, so I'm just there going, interesting. When actually, of course, I wasn't thinking, oh yeah, that's really, yes, I'll ponder that one. And I was just thinking, oh my God. So, it was difficult. And they were quite provocative in some of the questions they were asking about, sort of national directives and stuff. And you just have to be very careful, as an ambassador for an organisation, just have to keep it quite calm. And it wasn't easy, but they were very nice. They were very thoughtful and very supportive. We got very used to it after a while.
I bet. And Marc, I've got a question for you from David saying, will all platforms, does Bob take any publisher responsibility for the information and quality of the advice, case studies, especially given with Facebook and Twitter and introducing moderation? I don't know if you've seen that question.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, absolutely. So when we set out to build Bob, one of the key things was, as I mentioned, was this kind of co-creation element. We were really lucky in the early days to stumble upon a group at Oxford, NHS Foundation Trust, a mental health trust in Oxford. And they were fantastic. They really believed in Bob, and I'm actually an honorary employee at Oxford. And so that gave us access to people there. And one of the key things was people in roles like information governance and data security and those kinds of roles. And that really helped form what we did on the platform. And what we did, we took their advice on the easiest and smoothest way of dealing with these kind of things, because clearly we don't want incorrect information on the platform, but also we don't have the time nor the expertise to necessarily critique and edit things correctly. So what we came up with was a process where the individual that wants to publish a story in Bob has to seek their line manager's approval, and that's documented in our platform, as well as ensuring that they've abided by specific compliance pieces, which I won't go into now, but it's around names and identifiers and things like that, and generally confidential information, making sure that's not there. Once it's then submitted, we do a review from a quality perspective, and what we're checking for there is errors, names that shouldn't be there, data that shouldn't be there, and then there's a back and forth between the author and ourselves before it actually goes live. So we don't necessarily say we review every single word there and make sure it's compliant, but we don't necessarily want to change what's written. It's really verbatim, really from the person's experience. What we're really trying to do is avoid any errors, anything that's incorrect, anything that's wrong, anything that's just, rude. And we've got a set of content standards that we abide by, really. So the responsibility is on the person that is publishing it to make sure it's correct information. We make that very, very clear in everything on our platform, but we do naturally have a right to make sure the quality is there and it abides by our content standards.
Lovely.
So yeah, we do suggest and recommend if things are completely wrong.
I wish I had time for another question, but I'm just really aware that everybody's going to need a few minutes of comfort before we go into the next session. I have had a question saying how are things currently at the Royal Free. If you can give us literally a 30-second, Rachel, and then I'll say thank you to you both.
We're okay. We're in a good strong position at the moment. Thanks.
Good. Lovely. So look, I really thank you both very, very much for the generosity of your time and your insight. It's been absolutely fantastic to have you both here. Much appreciated. Have a good day. Thank you, Rachel, for everything that you have done. I will thank everybody for that. Really appreciate it. And good luck. Let's all, everybody stay safe and take care, and let's hope that things continue on the positive trajectory that seems to be moving forwards, I guess. Thank you so much.
Thank you, and thanks, Marc, for sharing the platform. That's so interesting.
Thanks, Rachel. Yeah, I think we should maybe connect afterwards.
I think so.
All right, everybody. So see you in 5 minutes. The next session will start at 10:30. You should all have the Zoom links. So look forward to seeing everybody at the next session. Thanks so much.
Thanks for having me.
Bye.